Tony's been through very, very big amounts of change in his career, law enforcement and government and cybersecurity.
We've always had cybersecurity in all societies, be it from medieval times when you have a portcullis, you could have the biggest cavalry. It's always been there.
In the MindHug Shore model, which is our core model that we do, safety is the first thing.
For me, as an individual, it's recognizing the power of people around you and your hub and support mechanism. Because without that, I'm not that individual who I would be.
Well, welcome everyone. This is another series of We Got You. It's a MindHug series on change. And today, my studio guest is Tony. Tony, thanks for coming. And the reason we brought Tony for the series on change is because Tony's been through a very, very big amount of change in his career. Started off in the law enforcement and government, and now you've been very, very instrumental in the cybersecurity change we're seeing in the UK. You run a business on that as well.
Absolutely.
You're also one of the partners with MindHug on the cybersecurity initiatives that we carry out. So really, I just want to use this as an opportunity to see and bring to light what is the change you're seeing and what's driving some of that change, both from a technological as well as from a social side as well. So without further ado, why don't you just let everyone know your background, what you do, and then we can get into some questions.
Thank you, Raj. It's a pleasure to be here. And we at Keen Cyber, we've been working close with Raj and MindHug to actually bring together our two. There's some commonalities what we have, and our mantra is really around people and human first sort of interaction and engagement. So I started off initially I qualified as an engineer and just stumbled. My career started off sort of at what they called the Y2K boom.
I remember that.
And it was...
I think there'll be some people over here who are not from the 1900s, as it's called nowadays.
No.
So you want to tell everyone what Y2K was?
Yeah, so the Y2K... So, it was a big deal at the time, what they called the millennium. So it was from 1999, which always synonymous to... There's a song by Prince, 99, and growing up, it seemed quite... a far distant sort of thing to reach the 1999, and it was a new era coming into the 2000s and millennial, and essentially there was a massive, I would call it a panic around, if people know about computing, it's all binaries, zeros and ones, and everyone thought that the competition in terms of the time, there would be an anomaly with the way the computers behaved. After
they thought the coding was limited to up to 1999.
Yeah,
right?
and there would be some kind of glitch thereafter. So I graduated literally around the summer of that sort of June, and then out in the wide open world. And then, as most sort of students do, you started to temp, started just working. And the first job I got was working for one of the service integrators. Again, because of the Y2K sort of the build up towards that, it was a case of actually they wanted numbers and field engineers, as they called them at the time, to actually go to client sites and be available. So it was great sort of exposure. And at the same time, it was a great introduction, shall we say, into the world of IT at the time.
And the funny thing is, we've had more glitches since Y2K than before Y2K or at Y2K. And here's where it's interesting. People didn't know what was going to happen at Y2K till midnight, right?
Exactly.
So people were waiting. I remember, and it became a cultural phenomenon, right?
That's
I
right.
remember J-Lo's song "Waiting for Tonight." You remember that?
Yes.
And it was everyone was playing that,
yes,
just because of Y2K.
Exactly.
And there was a wrestler. I remember, if you remember, Chris Jericho.
Yes.
He became Y2J. You remember that?
Yes.
It was.
Yes.
It just became.
And it was sort of the new labor era
when midnight ticked.
Exactly.
Everyone just sighed a sigh of relief, right? It was just.
The corporations and the government saying, actually, this is going to occur. And do you remember, even Microsoft jumped on the bandwagon. They had, at the time, it was Windows 98, wasn't it? And then they had a Millennium version, Millennium Edition. Yeah. As always, multinationals jump on the bandwagon from a marketing point of view. But then there's also the fear factor, and some of it is introduced to not give you a state of panic, but to ensure that people stay within their realms and not push the boundaries, should we say.
And we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about perception. We're going to talk about fear, because you and I have spent many, many hours chatting about, and that's part of the reason we started partnering up as well, because of the social side of cybersecurity. And we're going to talk about this. And Microsoft is a good example, given what's happened in the world recently.
Yes. Yeah. Microsoft have been synonymous to, I think, throughout the maturity of IT. And again, if you look at Microsoft, wouldn't have existed without, as they call it, Big Blue or IBM. It was obviously DOS, which started off, but then, people.
A lot of companies might not have existed without IBM. I mean,
exactly.
Apple drew a lot of influence from IBM
Absolutely.
as well. Yeah.
But I think I think that's probably one for another podcast where we could talk about the history and the evolution of IT.
Yeah.
But going back to my career. So as I said, I literally started to temp or contract into working for these service integrators, and then I just naturally went into working within the IT field, and then it sort of transpired that a lot of contracts were within the government and defence side of things, and that's, to this day, that's where, again, a lot of my career has been involved around governmental law enforcement. It's pretty much been the full circumference of around that area. Why I like working within that space is it's always changing. There's always new initiatives, and there's always a change of government. With that there's a change of direction, and also a fresh stance, as they call it. There's never a dull day, I think. And I think our British civil service and the civil service itself, they get a hard time on how press when you think governments can change every 4 years, but the personnel and the individuals who work within those institutions, be it in government, in education, whatever, they're there for the long haul. And I think it's testament to those individuals, really, because sometimes they're unsung heroes. And I worked in sovereign functions as well. I was in the central bank regulator. And, it's funny that you're always judged on failures, right? You're not judged when things are going wrong. When things are going well, yes.
Well, things are going right, rather. And it's interesting. And cybersecurity is a very, very prime example here, because people have this expectation that cybersecurity is foolproof, or it should be foolproof.
Absolutely.
And there's so many reasons from a technological perspective and or social perspective that almost everyone will face a breach at some point. In fact, there were surveys done with IT managers, senior IT managers, and I think the vast majority of them, well above 50%.
I think it was over 50%. Absolutely.
Well over 50% said they have at some point in their career faced breaches. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's only the people who actually answer the survey in the first place.
Exactly.
Right?
And the ones that know about they've been breached.
Correct.
There are organizations who have been breached but don't even know they have been.
Correct.
So,
okay. And I mean, if an organization, like CrowdStrike in Microsoft, the largest organizations, most technically savvy organizations, can face breaches. And we saw what happened in the Paris Olympics as well, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right? So people are going to get breached because it doesn't exist in silos, right? Technology doesn't exist in silos. It's not only the tech companies, you also got the malicious actors also developing, etc., right?
Correct.
Technology is developing, so it's not in silos. Right?
Absolutely.
So and nothing is foolproof, and technology is as much about social controls and people as it is about the underlying technology, right?
And fundamentally, the technologies and the products and the services, it's man-made, right?
Right.
You can't blame the computer or AI for someone else's failings, because that code and the actual infrastructure it's built on, the actual the delivery, how it's actually deployed, it's all controlled by us, by that human factor. So there needs to be some accountability, and I think particularly in this day and age, Raj, there's a lot of blame game around blaming the tech. The human factor is fundamental.
Correct.
Be it from when we started off in 10 BC to where we are now today, there is it's imperative that we as human beings, we still do those fundamental things like we're doing today and engage in. with one another and sharing that knowledge.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think there's a subtlety there, right? So it's not about blame, because blame assumes we're supposed to be these perfect human beings, which none of us are supposed to be perfect. I mean, we are going to make mistakes, and
Yes,
there will be those failures. It's how you deal with those failures, how you mitigate the risks with those failures.
exactly.
It's how you come back from it that really determines it. And I think it's very easy to say the technology is the issue, because the challenge with that is then we're not changing the environment to ensure that the social failures don't happen, because we just assume it's the technology.
Yes,
Now, no one's saying you have to blame the people who may have influenced some of those failures, but you do need to recognize that those failures come from people for us to actually implement solutions that can change some of that. Right?
And as I said, accountability. You put your to put your hands up and say, "Hey, I've made a mistake.
Yeah.
I take account of it, and we will learn from it, and actually, be it through your customer base or be it through your own family, as if you had siblings, you had arguments with your siblings, but then the very next day, it would be water under the bridge, and you would be even playing field where you say, okay, I was wrong, they were wrong, and then you just carry on about your business as always, and live that life as you should. But there are still individuals out there who still want to do that blame game.
Yeah, and I think that blame game itself is a safety mechanism, right? Because we're not able to want to admit that we did wrong, because that almost makes us feel like we're
inferior.
We're inferior or fallible. And that's an environmental issue, right? That's because we're taught that.
Yes.
And so it's not, again, that individual's fault. It's the environment that shapes
absolutely.
that behavior. But maybe it's a good time to segue here. Let's just ask a very general question. And this is not necessarily linked to cybersecurity, but just generally. What does change mean to you?
Change, in my mind, there's two aspects. From even a personal and working capacity, there's a negative aspect where change, you think it's going to impact you in a negative way. And an example of that is when you're growing up, if you're, let's say, one of the older siblings, I give that analogy, and then your mother tells you there's going to be another sibling coming into the family, your instant reaction for most is that, oh, well, I'm not the only person in the nucleus, and it could be a negative impact. So, that's that personal analogy. From a company perspective, again, that change where it could be there's a new CEO or a new CISO, the workforce, they know there's going to be a change of direction, and that new individual, the leader, that leader would change the way the organization actually delivers on their mandate and their strategy, should we say. And again, often there's that negative aspect and around self-preservation for me, from a person, is how's it going to impact me? What's it going to do? The flip side to that is change is, the positive is it can bring you out of your comfort zone. Actually, you could maybe take on new skills in the personal world, in your personal life. The change, if you're going to the same holiday, let's say, every year to that same seaside, it could be, Bognor or Southend on Sea, wherever it is. But then you decide to change and you say, I'm going to go to Spain. And then that...
Or Turkey, like you just did.
Yeah. So, and then the year you went to Spain, you meet someone who changes your life, or, you come across some individuals like yourself who gives you a different mindset. I think really as human individuals, we need to see change as not really a negative thing, and always look at the positives and what change can bring.
Yeah. So there's this exercise in Buddhism that the monks do very, very often, is they build these beautiful structures with sand, art, if you go see them. And the goal of that whole thing is not designing that art. It's actually immediately after you've designed that art to destroy it. Okay?
Wow. Yes.
Because it's to train them to know that everything is temporary.
Yes.
Right?
And to enjoy the moment.
Enjoy the moment.
Yes.
Right? So,
yes. Sort of like the ice sculptures.
Yeah, correct.
I know they're man-made, but when you actually see the ice sculpture visually, it's impressive, isn't it?
Yeah.
So absolutely. It's I think that's a great point you've mentioned in terms of our senses. I don't think we use our senses well enough as we should.
But also recognize the limitations of our senses.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Because some people just assume the senses is getting all the information possible, and
yes,
and we know that's not true because we're always dealing from shortcuts, right? And so I think you're right. We do need to appreciate whatever information comes through, and people automatically assume change is bad.
Yes,
right, and that's the assumption we have made that we have relied on, and that might have genetic roots, that might have evolutionary roots, because we didn't have much control of our environments back in the day, and we probably still don't have a lot of control of our environment.
Yeah, and it's the status quo. I think there is a generational thing as well, Raj. I think I'm sort of subject to that as well, because as you get older, you do realise you still question things, but you're happy to go about your business, and you want that it's stability, and that your lifestyle. If anything changes or there's some deviation with that, it's completely negative.
Yeah.
It's a negative.
Yeah, and I guess that's because how we're trained, and that goes back to the early discussions we had about the blame culture, right?
Yes,
and really it being an environmental issue.
Absolutely,
because, and I guess we can go back to the genetics and the evolutionaries of it, because we had no control of our environment. We had to focus on individual threats within that environment.
That's right.
Right? Because we couldn't control the environment, right? So we would focus on the snake or the saber-toothed tiger.
The saber-toothed tiger,
right?
Yes.
And that started kind of moving into individuals, right?
Yes.
So we had to stop blaming individuals at that point. And the more we start doing something from a psychological perspective, and Rebecca, who's your partner, who will be on one of our podcasts, she and I have chatted about this because she's got a psychology background, right? It just becomes more and more reinforced, and you start focusing on that.
No, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think living in a metropolis, like in big cities, there isn't much change. It's quite static. You give the analogy of, in the early days, Mesopotamia or societies where they were nomads.
Yeah.
They never had a place they can call home. They were always on the move. Now, is that a negative? There's two sides to that. They were always seeing new things on their journey,
right? And
they were being educated in that manner. Whereas you think we're being educated and we are sophisticated in the metropolis, but really we're in 4 brick walls, aren't we? In reality, in terms of going back to what we do in Keen Cyber, I think it's probably worth mentioning. Keen Cyber was sort of evolved with me meeting Rebecca Keen, my business partner, and how we came across yourself, Raj, around our philosophies aligned around, regardless of what we're actually doing in our actual subject matter sort of field, it's always been around the people first and that engagement. And I think I always see when you sort of have that human interaction and you meet someone for the first time, rather than through a Zoom call or through Teams. Actually, when you meet someone, there's a completely different outlook. I think it's very key that that remains, going forward. There's human interaction, because I think without that, as human beings, we won't prosper. I don't think.
And we can look at this from, even from a nervous system perspective. Okay, there are theories out there that talk about how anxiety and depression and emotions more generally were communication mechanisms pre-language. And the only way some of those feelings of disquiet, whether it be anxiety or depression, which, by the way, used to trigger based on the environment. So if there was a threat in front of you, you might go anxious to actually communicate to your tribes people that there's a threat around me, so that they could actually come and chase that threat away.
Yes.
Now, what's happening in today's world is we are detecting threats which are not necessarily threats, but those threats are different for individual people.
Yes.
Because we're a global world now, but other people can't recognize it. And even if they could recognize it, we're just becoming more and more insular as a society. that the tribe's not coming to chase that threat away.
Agreed.
Right. So we're not being able to get those emotions and the nervous system at a stage.
No, that's a fair point. And I think the pandemic and obviously lockdown was probably a good use case for that, because there was individuals who were used to actually having that interaction, going to the office, having their routine, and all that broke down. Because, not all of us have families, should we say. Some individuals are, they're solitary. They would be that persona at work, and then when they're home, they're themselves. But without that routine, it breaks the individual, and it takes. And again, I think that's what makes us unique around as human beings. There is no right or wrong, and there's no actually particular pattern or way of actually living. It's all individual, and
we all live different realities, but we think we live one, right?
So and it's I think regardless in the personal or in the workspace, it's for us to understand as we evolve or as we develop in our own sort of life. We need to actually embrace that and understand it, because that's where, particularly with your leader, will have no appreciation of success.
And that boils down to two things, right? And we're going to talk about leadership in cybersecurity in a minute. But that boils down to two things. And this is where but Rebecca has two businesses. She also has a recruitment business.
She has a recruitment business,
and,
right.
and she and I have always talked about this, that you have to bring the people who fit your culture as well, right?
Yes.
Who are not just doing this as a job, but it's a combined endeavor, right? And the combined endeavor through a common philosophy.
It is.
Right? It doesn't take away from someone having a different philosophy. And everyone has a right to a different philosophy. It just makes that work a little bit harder if people have different philosophies.
Absolutely.
It makes the leader's job harder. It makes the individual's job harder.
I think the engagement is somewhat fraught if there isn't that commonality from the offset. So the key takeaway there is, it's as businesses understanding the requirements of your actually what you're setting out to do as a business, but really, that's only 50-60%. The other 40% is actually the engagement piece. We have got that advantage when you look at compared to other nations, because culturally we are very diverse, and it does give us some kind of a different outlook.
As long as we don't have factions that get threatened by that difference.
Yes. And the arrogance, what comes around it,
which by itself is also a threat response, right?
It's
not actually their fault. It's just the shortcuts that they're using to process it.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because you would see that particularly in the IT industry for the past 2 decades, the term outsource. If it's a menial task, I'm going to outsource it.
Yeah.
That's
devaluing.
That's devaluing the
world.
It is.
Whole world. Yeah.
It is, because it doesn't matter how menial the work is, or it's adding values to the organization.
It's the age-old thing, right? People knew how powerless they were, so they just sought control, and the best way of seeking control was power. And if you couldn't get power, fake it.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So
absolutely.
Yeah. So
build a cottage industry, as they call it. Yeah. Just to make you give yourself gratification, isn't it?
But that all stems down from the fact of how powerless people feel often. And I was talking to someone just the other day, and talking about how change happened in their lives, and they spoke about the fact that I had to change because they were having challenges with an individual, come from a place of not feeling indebted to that person.
Right.
So a place of equality.
Yes.
Right. And that went both ways, right? That person had to accept that they were not indebted.
Right.
And the other person had to understand that there was no debt to be paid.
I see.
Right.
I see.
And both of them stem from the environment that has shaped us.
Yes.
Right. And let's bring this discussion now back to the cybersecurity industry, because that's somewhere where you've been a huge proponent of change, just generally.
Yes.
Why is cybersecurity so important in today's world?
Here's the conundrum here with, and I think there is a fear with it's the human factor, as I always say. The term cybersecurity and labeling something, it brings that. A lot of times, particularly in industry, it's deemed as a bad term, a negative. Security, cyber, and when I look at it, if I go back, and if you go back in society, I always go back in history. We've always had cybersecurity in all societies, be it from medieval times when you have a portcullis to protect your surrounding. You could have the biggest cavalry in the 17th, 18th centuries. Genghis Khan having the biggest manned army. However, as we found out, the biggest armies, use a Trojan horse analogy, where there's always a chink in the armory and there's always a vulnerability.
And the Trojan horse, by the way, was social engineering, right?
It's social engineering,
right? They
exactly.
brought a horse in and everyone thought it was a horse, and then they had the whole army in that horse,
No,
right?
exactly.
Yeah?
So I think it's always been there, but there's always been a different term or a different label. And the term cybersecurity, as I said, it was always deemed as information security in the early days, in the 80s and 90s. And then they brought the term cyber. It's around educating people around saying we are not a hindrance. It's there to actually sort of facilitate and actually complement your business. And actually we're there as a positive, or I would say a positive driver. And that's the key thing really for cybersecurity. You need to, I think there's always that fear that what people don't understand, where as as individuals, if you don't understand something, straight away I'm going to have my guard up, and I don't like this. I don't like this. I'm used to this way of working, and I'm sticking by that. But you over here, you're bringing in this change. I don't like it, and this is where I think, particularly as leaders, it's about educating those individuals who we work with and saying we are not a hindrance. We're there to be an asset to your business and help your business actually strive.
And it's probably a good time to explain why we started working together, because we both spoke about this, probably a year ago now,
yes,
when we thought about this. And we had the same discussion, and we said we have to educate people. But you mentioned exactly what we spoke about, which was safety, right? People put their guard up. And we know from a biological and a psychological perspective that when the guard is up, it's like talking to a wall,
exactly.
Right? Because the body actually shuts down,
it's
right? You can see it in
it's
brain
a fuzz.
scans.
It's
right?
a fuzz.
It's brain scans because
yes.
it goes into threat mode. And threat mode means all the body's trying to do is escape.
Yes.
Now, that's not the person's fault. That's not our fault. But until we understand what's actually happening from information processing in the individual,
yes,
when you get on that stage, you can't actually implement change.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So, which is why in the MindHug SHORE model, which is our core model that we do, safety is the first thing. Because before any change can happen, you need to bring the nervous system to a stage where it can actually acquire information. And there's no way it's going to acquire information if it's tricked into believing it's running away from a saber-toothed tiger.
Yes.
Right? So the work we're doing now, which the workshops as well, which we're doing collectively, is why are we bringing in breath work and sound therapy and mindfulness into that? Because we're trying to give people that safety, before we can, it's a positive Trojan horse, right? It's a positive Trojan horse.
No,
right?
absolutely. And I can bring that same analogy with cybersecurity. CISOs, CEOs, CIOs, if they were actually compromised within their organization or previously, they would carry those scars and they would have that guard up, and their first reaction would be, rather than looking at the nucleus of the issue and saying and looking at it as they would as leaders, logically and strategically, they would have that particular that reaction where I need to protect myself. Let me invest in the technology. The tech is going to cure me. The tech is not going to cure you, because you need to understand as I said, the nucleus of the issue. Yes, the technology could protect your estate, but fundamentally before that, it's your workforce. It's actually your people. It's actually how did the actual compromise happen in the first place? And we've always discussed this, Raj, around 90% of all compromises and ransomware attacks are human interaction. Still.
And people think they're not going to be defrauded.
No.
But the social engineering just gets more and more sophisticated, right?
As I said in the early career, I was always told email is not a guaranteed form of delivery. But we all expect that email to come in milliseconds, don't we? And at the same time, it's still the basic sort of technology sort of forms, like text messages, emails, which are duping.
Phone calls.
And phone calls. And really...
I got a call from Amazon the other day because of the MacBook that I ordered the night before. And I basically told them, no, I didn't order a MacBook. I ordered 6.
Yes.
Okay. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do.
It was off the script, wasn't it?
Like that. I don't know. What happened to the other 5 that I ordered?
The script, they weren't taught that in the script, were they? So it's no, absolutely. And I think really, fundamentally, that's what we're here for. Really, around it's going back to the basics and understanding, replaying something, and actually learning from those mistakes in the first place. As we said, as we were as children, or when we were corrected by your teacher, it's actually learning and saying, actually, that was the root cause of where I went wrong, and actually taking account for it.
Yeah.
But
taking account for it to learn.
To learn,
right?
exactly.
Not to blame.
Not
right?
to blame. Not
yeah.
to blame.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And this is where the industry, I think, particularly, and it's not just the cybersecurity industry. I think it's business as a whole. There is a lot of unfactual information and also scaremongering, which really needs to be actually brought to the fore. And as a community, we should be calling it out as SMEs. And look, end of the day, everyone's here to make a profit. Yeah, but I think we always say this when myself and Rebecca and yourself, Raj, we always say it's the benefit of the business. It's no point making a profit if there's no benefit for
responsible profit
and for both parties. Yeah, and that's where ethics come in. I think really, I've always been straight down sort of in terms of ethically, are you actually delivering a service which is true to yourself and the business?
Yeah, as an economist, I mean the word I use is, look, if you add 10 units of value or 10 units of happiness, which is the fundamental premise of an economy, right?
Yes.
It's to add value and happiness so we can enhance the human experience. It's not to make money. Money was just a way we were able to transact so we could do it efficiently.
So we could do it efficient, exactly.
Right? So the goal is to enhance the human experience. And if I add 10 units of happiness into the human experience, which wouldn't have existed without us, and we say, can we keep 2 of that? All right? We still added 10 units.
You still add 10 units, yeah.
We've made a profit on the 2 units.
Yes.
Okay. But there's still 8 units out there, which is there for everyone to enjoy.
Yes.
Okay. So that's the way I kind of define responsible profit and impact entrepreneurship and everything.
Absolutely.
Right.
But then most organizations want the additional 2 units.
Or they don't add any units of happiness
yes.
and they are still tricking people through information into believing they've added 10 units and actually taking 2 units. So it's a negative happiness into the world.
Absolutely.
So you have 0 added, but you tell the world, it's like selling blueberry pie to someone who likes apple pie, or is allergic to blueberries. telling them it's apple.
It's not going to go down well.
It's not going to go down well, right? So there's you can make money off it.
Yes.
But you've added no happiness into the world.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So that's what I look at. But this is really good. So you've spoken about the executive team, and this is probably a good time to say the journey that MindHug and Keen Cyber has been on over the last year or so. So we started obviously on DSBD, Digital Security by Design, the initiative, the government, one of the largest digital security initiatives in the government. We started from a technical point because we wanted to develop technology, and we realized one of the limitations in healthcare is digital security and regulation. So we started working on Cherry and Morello, which is this really, really sophisticated piece of technology that kind of splits memory.
It's a foundation, really.
It's the foundation.
And
it's a new chip, basically.
And for those who don't know, Cherry was devised by the University of Cambridge, and
ARM as well.
And ARM look at the positives for what Cherry actually and those initiatives are going to bring.
And that becomes a social concept, right? So the benefits. So that's why we started moving towards more the social and psychology of it. And probably it's a good way of saying, what do you think is the best way? And we've spoken about safety, which I agree is paramount. We've talked about bringing people in the workforce who share that vision with you. Okay. But what do you think is the way we need to showcase benefits? Because here's another problem, right, in the world. All right. We have more information, more data in the last 2 years.
Yes.
All right. Than all of human existence before that. Okay. More data has been generated in the world in the last 2 years than all of human existence before that.
Yes.
Okay. So we are not only dealing with an abundance of data that needs to be kept secure, we're also dealing with an abundance of data which we have to navigate to get any message across. Okay? And by the way, this abundance of data is acting as triggers to get the guard up on people.
Yes.
And because it's exponentially higher, the threat mode is exponentially higher as well,
It's high,
which
absolutely.
makes change higher. So what have you seen in the work you've done, both in law enforcement and defense, as well as through your consultation, that has worked in helping people understand the benefit of digital security and organizational change more generally, and actually implementing it?
Fundamentally, as a team, we need to get that buy-in from the individual. So it's always that initial engagement where the early engagement is key. When I come in and actually meet the team, I always like to meet the team, particularly not just actually the senior members of obviously the management team, but the team. And when I say the team, it could be the development team, it could be a HR team, but the team who's actually delivering the key sort of requirements and bread and butter for the business. And I try and do we call it the Keen Space or the Keen Works. It's essentially a workshop where we'd present a bit about ourselves, what we've been brought in to do, and push our initiative around cybersecurity. As I said previously, rather than it being a hindrance, it's actually it could help you within your day-to-day job. It's purely around, as individual, cyber resilience. Prevent is always the key thing, and it's actually learning, teaching the workforce to actually understand those techniques around that, and I think it's really fundamental around when people think as you get older, it's too late to learn, and we're learning every day, and you need to have that mindset. And I think it's telling those individuals that, because it's quite easy for them to actually say, I don't know anything about technology, I don't understand it. And we always come in, and the first thing we always say is, it's forget the technology. It's actually asking, what value are you bringing? What is your role in the organization? Everyone's an asset to the organization. And actually, if you did, for instance, click on the email, or if you did actually let that visitor into the building, what will be the ramifications and the implications? And it's working through those playbooks. So a lot of those sort of the workshops are around the fundamentals on how an individual would behave, rather than the tech. And
that must be very validating for the individuals, because I think, and this is coming from a place of genuineness, by the way, just so everyone knows, we're not trying to, manipulate the workforce or so. The workforce is there to come work together.
Absolutely.
I would say the counter, which is not happening now, is actually the manipulation.
It
right?
is.
Which is people feeling like they have no power, right, to be working together. And part of that actually boils down to people just taking a job because it becomes survival instinct, and some people have to do that. Don't get me wrong.
Absolutely. It's a necessity. It's a necessity for them to live.
Correct. And then also goes back to the point that they're not feeling part of the mission. Okay.
Yes.
And they're not feeling part of the mission because that boils down to a leadership challenge. It's not always cascaded down, or they're just not the right cultural fit for that organization, which can happen. And a right cultural fit doesn't mean, there's anything wrong with you. It just means people are different, and that's the bottom line, right?
Exactly.
So the question really is, if we had to influence leaders to understand this, because also one other thing I want to understand, is there anything that you do different to other organizations, you think, to get in front of those leaders so you can actually have those conversations?
Me and Rebecca, we always find when we talk to leaders outside their comfort zone, i.e. not in their actual workplace.
I call that a discomfort zone almost.
Yeah, so where they essentially that they are themselves. So the coffee shop or the actual, you may go for a meal. We'll go for a meal in the evening, and then we might have gone to a seminar, and we bump into the CISO who was at that actual seminar, and then it's just small talk initially around the individual, around who you are.
It's about people
and
right?
the person, and then it's a natural, really conversation about the individual, and then it just transpires. We work in cybersecurity. Oh, I'm a CISO.
Yeah,
and that's really it. I think it's a natural,
because you've already taken their guard off.
Yes, exactly.
And then they're able to appreciate the true genuineness of the effort rather than
absolutely
the genuineness being masqueraded as a threat, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And this is where I think there's still that mindset where there is that hard, those email mail shots, those sort of cold calls, which none of them are really going to bring value. They may bring a sale, but are you going to have that longevity with the client? Probably not. And I think a majority of the time we go our separate ways. We don't. There is nothing to close, or there's no further engagement, and that's fine. I think
you had a good human connection. That's yeah,
exactly. And I think really fundamentally, it's with those engagements. Sometimes we learn something as well, because
I would just say that it's really what you're doing is you're trying to connect as a human being rather than it being an imposition, right? You're trying to connect as a human being and seeing if they can get some value from it, because by connecting and validating their experience as a human, you've dropped that safety guard, which we've spoken about over and over again.
Exactly. It's very much around understanding the business and building up the resilience through the workforce.
Yeah.
Because that's really where your profits and your delivery is all coming from.
Yeah.
Your workforce. The rest will, again, it will be actual natural progression if as you do that engagement and that journey, isn't it?
Yeah. No, 100%. In fact, one of the projects we did with the DSPD and Describe ecosystem, which is linked to Cherry, was around was around regulatory standards for healthcare companies. And GDPR in the EU is valid, HIPAA in the States, and we felt that really the parent standard, which it's not a parent standard, but it covers a lot within HIPAA and GDPR, not everything, was the ISO standards, right?
Yes.
The ISO 27001. And if you look at the standards, and I can't remember off the top of my head how many standards there were because but can get the project. In fact, we'll put a link in this podcast as well to the project we did. The vast majority, well over 50% of the standards were social standards.
Yes, that's right.
Not technical.
That's right.
Right?
Exactly
right.
That.
And that was because of a recognition that it is someone leaving a password out, or someone passing a password, or someone sending details that they shouldn't be sending.
Yes.
The other case that was going on with Meta/Facebook around that person who sent faulty invoices and made millions.
That's right. Yes.
Right.
Yeah. That was a funny one. Yeah.
So they were controlled, and in fact there were a lot of. I think that the article said man steals millions, and someone said it's not stealing, we're stealing because they handed it.
That's right.
And I think that then someone corrected that. Yeah, but it's still fraudulent behavior, which it is. But it was just interesting play on words, and that just goes back to how language can change things, right?
No, absolutely.
The right word. Okay, so look, this has been a great chat. Now, I know we're coming to the end now. So the one question I'm going to ask you is, what is it like working with MindHug?
Well, I'm here today, and you haven't scared me off yet, Raj. But no, look, I think it's been a really, it's been educational from my point of view, because, as I said, I was always it's probably over the past 2 or 3 years, the focus has been on human resilience, and actually engaging with you, it's actually complemented that and actually broadened out our actual horizons around what you're doing in your space and what we do, and there is some synergy and commonality absolutely within the two strands, even though we're two worlds apart.
Yeah, but that just shows that the world was focused on a very conditioned and siloed view, not realizing everything boils down to people.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, really, MindHug has, I think, what you've done, Raj, to actually build the identity of MindHug and the ethos, I could see, I'm happy to be a part of that journey. And I can see things really where we as Keen Cyber and you as MindHug, that journey, I think there's a lot of good things to be looking forward to in the horizon. And I think it's testament to yourself in terms of that. You live the MindHug way. Yeah, there is, and I always say this, even within cybersecurity, I'm not going to actually advise you on something which is not my subject matter expert. I might my expertise. We say I would through the network, I may be able to recommend or advise someone, because within cybersecurity, as in within your space, it's vast, and ultimately, that's where we as we've got that network and that support mechanism. I call it the family, isn't it?
Yeah. We call it the family as well.
And to have that is a great thing to have, and it's really important as individuals that we actually know our limitations and know our strengths. Yeah, so I think that really it's been an absolute amazing, and it's not been a great length of time, has it, Raj? Really. It feels like I've known you forever.
I know. And it started with Rebecca, right? Because and that was not even when she was in cybersecurity. Well, she was, but she was on the recruitment.
She was on the recruitment side, yes.
On the side, and then you came along, yeah. And
yes, and and again, it was the same sort of. It seemed like the same way how I met Rebecca. It's the same way how we met, and it's like just really. Those sort of type of relationships you have to actually cherish, because it's just a natural thing where positivity brings positivity, as I always believe.
Yeah.
As like what Dalai Lama actually always says.
Yep.
And we need to actually promote that.
Yeah.
And
change is hard, right? Change is hard. I mean, we're going to fall a million times, and we talk about this. We keep falling a million times, right? Yeah, but
in industry, as I said, in those big contracts where there's so many moving parts, so many commercial constraints.
Yeah.
How do you actually unpick it? It's like, and really, it's actually being having that mindset to actually say, well, actually, I can work outside the box here.
Yeah.
And that's really what it's about.
Yeah.
There's sometimes there's rigid. You have to be rigid. But there is a flex.
Yeah.
The ruler does flex, doesn't it?
Yeah. 100%.
Cool. Yes.
All right. One final thing for our listeners, watchers, everyone around the world. What is the one thing, if you had to give away to people, that helped you during challenging times or during change? Could be anything. Book, quote, playlist. If it's a playlist, we can post it in the podcast.
Yes.
If you had to give away something, what would it be?
Music to me it's my escapism. And as humans, we've always got different moods. And that's where music really is great, isn't it? You can, there's music to exercise to, there's music to relax to, there's music to embrace and enjoy collectively. So music is really escapism for me, and also a soother. There's too many, I think there's too many sort of artists and songs to probably mention, but really, I think it's, for me as an individual, it's recognizing, as we mentioned it, recognizing sort of the power of people around you and your hub and support mechanism. Because without that, I'm not that individual who I would be, and that could be growing up from actually having a unconventional upbringing, should we say, and then meeting those people throughout your journey in that life. It could be, and like we have, it's that the power of those people and those individuals. Some of that makes you as an individual, and knowing that you're not alone when you're facing challenges and changes. I think really we should always have that mission, because as I said, there are individuals out there who feel very isolated and feel that they are very much in their own silo and they don't have that support mechanism. But really, it's about reaching out. And if they did reach out and actually knew that there was that outlet, it would become available to them.
And not only that, there are actually studies done on this which actually show that you're actually doing a favor to someone you reach out to by reaching out to them.
It's that good Samaritan
than actually imposition, because we are innately wired to want to help our tribe of people. Okay, so you're actually doing them a favor. Now, that doesn't mean you'll always get help.
No.
Because people need to, we know we're always in a very, very kind of irregulated nervous system stage because of the amount of information around us, right?
Yes.
And we can go into, and we're going to be doing a podcast on this at some point as well. So if you're always in a dysregulated information nervous system stage, when you go and ask for help, someone's not actually in the headspace to actually reach the deeper level of emotion and deeper level of human connection that's needed to provide that help. So in a sense, they are in a dysregulated, ill state themselves. That's why they don't provide help. But if someone is in a regulated state, and many people will be in a regulated state, we go through cycles, you actually do them a favor by asking them for help. So if someone doesn't give you help, it's probably because they're in a dysregulated state themselves. Right? But the point of the matter is there will be someone in a regulated state who will jump on anything to help.
So would you see that as a defense mechanism? What we talked
about? It's absolutely. It's more than a defense mechanism. It's the body and mind saying, we need to exit. Okay. Right. The nervous system is flared up because we are facing threats. Right. It doesn't know that information is misguided information. It's just using that information to make calculations.
Right.
And it uses them as shortcuts.
Right. But that's how your brain is. Every individual's brain is wired slightly different.
Correct. And every brain is wired to look at shortcuts.
Yes.
Because it was programmed when we had to run away from threats.
It's that repeat.
Yeah.
Exactly. or that situation they were in. Yes.
Correct. So we don't ever look at the full picture.
Right.
Yeah.
Understood.
Because we've been trained to run away from that tiger, and running away from that tiger meant we didn't have time to think. We heard rustling of leaves, we ran.
Yes.
Right. So we've always been programmed to deal with shortcuts. And the problem is abundance of information means we're dealing with so many shortcuts that our nervous system is confused.
It's so true. Obviously, in the world, in the development world, obviously the IT world, it's the goal is a short script so they can be done with it and move on to the next.
Okay.
And it's the same mindset.
Simple question: How many people will actually read the manifesto of who they're voting for?
Absolutely.
They'll ask the neighbor, the sibling,
or the company strategy.
Or company, yeah, exactly. They'll just hear things because we use heuristics, which is called shortcuts.
Yes.
Because the probability of us actually making a difference to that election is so small that the cost of actually acquiring that information is being calculated as so high.
So high, absolutely.
That we just base it on heuristics.
Yes.
Right, shortcuts.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really good.
But the bottom line, to end on a positive note, is most people are, in fact, not most people, every person is wired to help. Sometimes they're not in the nervous system states to be able to help, but that doesn't mean they don't want to help.
Yes.
Okay. In fact, that if anything, that means that sometimes they need help to actually calm that nervous system. Right.
Understood.
So people who ask for help say, "But I never got help." Well, that's because that person themselves might have needed help, but a person in a regulated state will jump to help because that's how we're hardwired.
Really insightful. Again. You learn something new every day. So, I mean, that's a completely different way of looking at things.
And you're doing them a favor.
Yes.
Strangely. So pick up that phone if you need help. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it's open book is one shared, isn't it?
Correct. Absolutely. Well, thanks a lot, Tony. we're going to be talking to your business partner at some point. So
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe the next session we'll get Rebecca. We can do another session on a specific topic, isn't it? And really, again, pleasure, and thanks for actually having me.
Thanks for coming, Tony, and thank you, everyone. And we'll see you next one.
Bye-bye now.